a win's a win, right? Yeah, it wasn't that bad, was it? Let's find out. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Blue Pride of London. I'm your host Nathan, and it's an absolute joy to see all of you here today. Thank you so much for tuning in to this video. So as always, before we start, I am going to urge you to please consider subscribing to this channel. And if you want to stay up to everything that we do here at the Blue Pride, please consider hitting that bell button. And if at any point you do enjoy this video, it would mean so much to me if you would hit the thumbs up button just down there. And that way, more people can see my wonderful face. So let's move swiftly on to last night's game in the Champions League against Zenit St. Petersburg, and have a little bit of a chat about the team and the players' performances and the overall feeling of the particular game, shall we? So as football games go, this wasn't too bad, I guess. It was a sort of like definitely, well, not definitely, not really a sort of David versus Goliath type of clash that I sort of maybe predicted it could be. I did think that, Chelsea would definitely run away with it. I gave it a 4-0 sort of scoreline. I thought we were literally going to sort of like just take them to the cleaners and have a very, very dominant sort of like game plan. But of course, Zenit St. Petersburg had their own type of game plan as well. It wasn't negative football, but it wasn't sort of like, they didn't go out there to necessarily win. They went out there, then in my personal opinion, I could be completely wrong, but it looks like they went out there to try to nick a win. Really, quite often Chelsea were on the front foot. They were sort of like really dominating possession. They was always going forward. They were always looking for that forward pass. And they seem to sort of just sit there, take up the pressure. And once they've got the ball, they will try to throw it downfield and try to sort of nick a goal in sort of both halves. That sort of seemed to be their sort of game plan. Sort of absorb pressure, and then go forward, which isn't negative football. It is a way that football has now gone when you play as a more sort of superior team. We see it all the time as Chelsea fans in the Premier League. The only time you get a bit more of an open type of game is when you're playing a team like Manchester United and Man City and Liverpool, teams who also have sort of like a lot of talent in their squad. But when you play a team that knows that they're up against it, and they absorb the pressure and then they try to run upfield, which is pretty much what they've done throughout the entire game. I think one of their first corners came in like the 20th, 30th minute, and it was pretty much the first time Mendy touched the ball. He was pretty much a spectator for the majority of this game. Even some of the saves that he made. I think there was one particular strike where it was number 40 or 44. Couldn't say his name. It's sort of like if you put a gun to my head. But, he took a shot. It was the first shot on target, and it was literally right down his throat. So he just caught it, bounced on the floor, and that was it. So he didn't really have much to do. And they made it very difficult for the Chelsea team. Chelsea always seemed to be sort of like going forward. And I know I just said that a little while ago, but it was a positive performance by Chelsea, but it was also a frustrating performance by Chelsea also, because they just couldn't find a way to get through their sort of like flat back 11. I know that sounds really bad, but yeah, and it did. It took up to the 69th minute for Lukaku to score the brace, and it was a beautiful taken goal. And it was something definitely when that goal went in, and I was getting frustrated because I saw games like this last season where we just couldn't seem to find a way through. And it's the reason why we bought the likes of Lukaku in the first place. We bought him to make that type of difference, to be the front man, to be the type of player who can win us games, which we have been missing since the Diego Costa sort of like period where, a player would just sort of take it and run for it. And it was a great goal because probably last season or season before, we were probably drawing this game 0-0. Or we would have probably lost it because we would have put so many people up front and they would have nicked the goal going forward. So it is an improvement. It is a really good sort of result for Chelsea. These are sort of like the sort of in-between team. Of course, we've got Juventus coming up in the group stage, and those are the guys who we are definitely going to be looking at, even though they haven't done very well in Serie A. These are the sort of like you would expect them to finish second, and they did a great performance last night. I think they won 3-0 in the end. So we're sitting second, and the lineup wasn't that surprising. So let's have a quick little look at the One Football app, which is an app that I use to get the majority of my football news, both for Chelsea and England, and I've taken this particular app off them. So yeah, this is their graphic. So I pretty much got the lineup spot on, apart from one difference. I put Timo Werner in sort of up the front three, but of course, instead, Hakim Ziyech took that spot, but everything else was absolutely fine. It was exactly the team that I thought was going to play, apart from that one addition, but it was a strong team. It was a team that, you know, you expect a defending champions to sort of put out. Like I said in my previous video, we looked at the idea of like, we want to show Europe that we are not just sort of done and gone type thing. Like, we've won it, we're not going to win it next season. We want to show that we have the right to be called European kings, European champions, and you know, we're going to put out a strong team and we're going to perform like a sort of the European champions that we are, and that's exactly what we've done. We put a nice strong team out. Kai Havertz, Timo Werner or Hakim Ziyech, that particular position was always up for grabs, especially with Christian Pulisic being out. But, you know, Ziyech got these sort of nods, and obviously Kai Havertz came on later on in the second half to sort of replace. But yeah, it was a strong team, a good performance throughout the entire sort of like from front to back, even though there wasn't really much for the defenders or the goalkeeper to do. But let's talk about some of the points that went on during this game. So the game overall didn't really have any sort of like star qualities. It wasn't like a game that you were constantly on the edge of your seats. It wasn't a complete and utter game where every 10 minutes you were cheering a goal. Chelsea found it quite frustrating every now and then. And you can sort of see why, because you know, they didn't want to lose the game and they didn't want to be embarrassed for the game. They didn't want Chelsea to sort of run radic. They didn't want to be the whooping boys of the group. So they did. They put up a good performance. And you have to remember as well that this isn't a weakened team. They are number one in their own league. You know, they are undefeated in their league. I think they've got Russia's top goal scorer in their team as well. So they're not a sort of like a weak team going forward. So yeah, they were going to give Chelsea a bit of a battle. And you could just sort of see that, you know, like Mendy, like I said before earlier on in the video, he didn't have much to do. It wasn't like it was a proper little workout for him going forward. There was a little bit of a moment when we thought maybe he might have to come on with a sort of a rib injury. Kepa got up and did a bit of stretching, and then he sat back down and opened his water bottle again. And the defence, they weren't sort of like struggled that much. I remember there was one sensational moment when Rudiger went, do you know what? Stuff this. And he went bombing down the centre of the pitch, sort of cut and weaved and all sorts of things. And, you know, if you've got a little bit more whip on the ball, he could have scored the opening goal, which would have been a sensational goal as well, you know. But it was that type of performance for Chelsea. Like they knew they were doing well. They knew that they were sort of on the upper hand. They just couldn't break through. You can just sort of see the frustration on many of the players. Mason Mount was exactly the type of same. Like, he was making all sorts of cuts and all sorts of runs, and he just, like, the final ball for Mason Mount last night didn't seem to be his sort of folly. I think maybe missing out the game against Aston Villa and being sort of like a little bit tired after the England games, his final product wasn't necessarily on point. He did give the ball away every now and then. This is not me slating on him. He still had a good game, but he's definitely had better games in the Chelsea shirt, and this is probably definitely one that he's going to sort of like chalk off, going, do you know what? Must try better. You know, a little bit like my maths results at school, really. You know, doing well, must try better. This is not me slating the team at all. Please don't think that for a second. Obviously, you know, they did do a good job and they got the job done in the end. Didn't really do much for my player predictor on the fifth stand app. You know, I really got that wrong. But yeah, like, there's not much more I can say about it, really. I think the team did very, very well. It's a good standing, and we went up against a team that didn't want to lose, but didn't necessarily want to win. And I think that's the most important thing. And what Chelsea done is what they do, what champions do, is that they grounded it out and they got the victory they needed, which is the important thing. When you play teams like this, and they don't really want to sort of attack unless they can or unless they should, you still walk away as winners, which has been the hiccup for Chelsea going into the past. We have gone up against these teams and we haven't been able to break them down. So this is an evolvement. We've evolved going forward. So I'm pleased with it. I look forward to the next game. Obviously, next up we have Tottenham in the league, which should be very, very interesting. So if you want to keep an eye out for that video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button just down there, and I will see you in a couple of days. Until then, enjoy the football, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.